Hello, beautiful soul. My name is Yulia, and I'm the voice of the podcast Love to Heal. This podcast outlines my journey from atheism to Judaism, exploring spirituality from diverse perspectives. It is my hope that my journey will inspire others to embark on their own adventure of self-discovery and spiritual growth. Hello, my dear listeners. If you are enjoying what you hear, please be so kind as to share my podcast with friends and family and whoever else you think might benefit from some spiritual and traditional inspiration. And let's begin. It's January of 2026, and it has been some time since the holiday of Sukkot. Last year in 2025, it fell on October 6th through the 13th. But I did not get a chance to talk about it last season, so I'm going to share my experience of last year's Sukkot now, because I think it is important that I share this information with you. It might be interesting and educational and hopefully inspiring to many. Now, before I jump into our personal preparation and celebration of this holiday, I do want to explain what Sukkot is all about. Sukkot is a joyous 7-day Jewish holiday in which we celebrate the fall harvest and commemorating the Israelites' 40 years of wandering in temporary shelters after leaving Egypt. This holiday is marked by building and dwelling in a sukkah and using the 4 species: lulav, etrog, myrtle, and willow. This holiday is also known as the season of rejoicing, and it emphasizes gratitude, divine protection, and unity. And the key traditions of this holiday are building a temporary hut with a roof of natural materials, such as branches that allow you to see the stars that symbolize reliance on God. This hut, to be considered kosher, requires at least 2 full walls and 1 partial wall. It should be sturdy enough to withstand wind, but not a hurricane. And it should have a roof, in Hebrew called schach, made from organic material. It could be branches or reeds. And again, this roof is to allow some sun and stars to be visible. And then the whole sukkah should be a minimum size of about 22 by 22 inches, but there's no maximum size limit. Dwelling in the sukkah means that we are to eat, celebrate, and sometimes even sleep in the sukkah for 7 days. The sleeping depends more on climate and weather conditions. The 4 species, what we do with that is we take those 4 species in our hands. We hold the etrog, which is, it's a citron. It looks like a big lemon. We hold that. We hold the lulav, which is a palm frond. Also the hadassim, which is the myrtle, and aravot, the willow. So we hold all that together and we shake it in specific directions to pray for the world. And finally, in terms of hospitality, it's important to welcome friends, family, and all kinds of guests into the sukkah. If you would like to see what Sukkot looks like in Israel, I highly recommend that you watch a movie called Ushpizin. It's an older movie from 2004, but it's very cute and it will give you a good idea of how Sukkot really ought to be celebrated and how it's done in the Holy Land amongst the ultra-Orthodox Jews. Last year was the very first time that my family actually celebrated this holiday. We didn't do everything we should have and probably could have done to commemorate this important holiday, but we did a lot. First of all, we built a sukkah. Never in my wildest dreams did I think I would have a sukkah in my backyard. for a whole week. When the time came to start thinking about how, where, and when to build it, I have to say the matter turned out to be a little bit more complex than we had expected. After looking at dozens of YouTube videos and Pinterest ideas for a sukkah, my husband and I settled on a wooden sukkah that would be temporarily built on our deck. If you plan to build a sukkah, you have many options. There are kits that are available even on Amazon or on different websites that are supposedly pretty easy to put together, but we decided that for our deck, it made sense to actually build this wooden sukkah, and also we thought it would be a good project to do as a family. We happen to have a 2-story deck, so we opted for construction on the second floor because it made serving food easier. The kitchen leads right to the deck, so that was sort of like a no-brainer. Otherwise, I would have to go a flight of stairs up and down each time I needed to bring out a dish. Unfortunately, or fortunately, my husband had to travel for work the weeks leading up to Sukkot. And in fear of not meeting the construction deadline, I called my dad and asked for his assistance. My dad is a contractor and very handy, so he immediately appropriated the project and told me to leave it to him. Now, my husband was not super happy about this because he had his own ideas of how to build the sukkah, and of course my dad had to change quite a bit of it. And in general, my husband wanted to partake in the construction, but instead what happened was that when my husband came back from his overseas trip, the majority of the sukkah was already built and not to his standards. After some discontent and family feuding, my husband came to an agreement with my dad, and he took it upon himself to make the final preparations for the holidays. Now, I was actually happy that I involved my dad because this way he had at least a tiny bit of exposure to Judaism. You know, having grown up communist and atheist, he never studied much about Judaism, nor did he observe any holidays, and I think it made him happy to see me and my family carry on the Jewish traditions and also to be invited to be part of it. And lately, actually, my dad tells me that he does believe in God, that he would like to learn more about Judaism, but then he ends up saying that he's too old and too stubborn at this point to begin anything new or, change his views on life. But I'm not giving up on him, which is why I invite him for Shabbat dinners from time to time, and sometimes to our synagogue too for special events, such as the giving of Jewish names to our kids. That episode is coming out soon. Look out for that one. It's going to be super interesting. Now back to the sukkah. Once the carcass of the sukkah was built, it was built out of 2x4s. It came time to put up the walls. And here, my husband and I, we did this ourselves. We decided to make the walls out of large tarps that we had, and they would protect us from wind very well and also rain, just in case. Because, it is the fall season, and we do live in Cleveland, Ohio. So you never know with the weather here. I also ordered a schach. Try saying that a few times in a row. Schach is the kosher roof that you are to put on your hut, on your sukkah. And the one that we got, I found actually on Amazon. It was super convenient. It said on it that it was kosher. Hopefully that was true. But it was made out of thin bamboo. So what we did with the roof, we first stretched a rope across the top 2x4s of the sukkah, which would support the light bamboo mats serving as the roof. Once all this was done, my daughter and I began to decorate. And that was the fun part for me. We used fake flowers, ribbons, streamers, and even some cute curtains that I found laying around in my basement. We got really creative. And by the way, if you'd like to see photos of my sukkah, you can head to Instagram or TikTok. You'll have to scroll a little bit because this was a few months ago, but it's all there. Since I have a pretty big family, we were concerned that we would not fit into our rather compact sukkah, but somehow we managed to seat almost 20 people, and I would say fairly comfortably. And thankfully, the weather did not disappoint either. Some nights it was chilly, so we wore coats, but other nights we were fine with just sweaters. And I was ecstatic to be able to host in a real sukkah of our own. One thing that we did not get to do was to shake the lulav and etrog every day in our sukkah. I could have bought it from our shul, from our synagogue, but to be quite honest, because this was our first time, we were feeling already a little bit overwhelmed with all the preparations and all the steps to follow that we just didn't feel like we were ready to carry out this mitzvah on our own. Because, there is a particular way to hold and shake the lulav and etrog. There are specific prayers to say at specific time, and we just didn't think we would do it correctly on our own this time around. Thankfully, we were able to do this at our rabbi's house and at our shul on several occasions, so we still partook in this mitzvah. Let me tell you a little bit about our rabbi's sukkah. Theirs was constructed right outside of their kitchen, one of the walls being the wall of the house. So that wall that is basically the kitchen wall, it already had a kitchen window in it, and that made it easy to also serve food from the kitchen right to the sukkah through the window. So that was one of the walls, and then they constructed actually 1, 2, 3 more walls, because you can have 4 walls if you want. You just need to have a minimum of 2 plus a partial wall, but they every year do all walls. It basically becomes like an enclosed room, and those walls were constructed of plywood, and they kept us very warm. At their table, I would say they sat about 16 people, and while at their dinner, we enjoyed saying all the proper blessings, of course. We sang Jewish and Yiddish songs, and we ate super delicious Jewish dishes such as gefilte fish with horseradish, chicken soup, and various types of meat. We also had a chance to visit our head rabbi's sukkah. Now, just so you understand, our synagogue is quite large, and so we have 2 rabbis. One is the main one, the head rabbi, and then he has a daughter who is married to this man who is the second rabbi, the younger one. But our head rabbi's sukkah, it was even larger, and they have this really cute tradition where guests come in and they write their names on the plywood, and you can kind of look around and see who has been there. And we were reading through some, and there was a few dating from like a decade or I think even longer. And there was one that my mother-in-law recognized her own writing from many, many years ago. So it was just really nice to see all that. And every year we sign again to say, our family was there on such and such date. And that's really cute. You can look back at it every year that you visit. And so the other thing that our shul does every year for Sukkot is they organize a scavenger hunt for the Hebrew school students. And since my kids attend Hebrew school, they always love to go to this event. And we like to go too because we get to learn a ton about the holiday and we get to visit 3 sukkahs. And like I said, we have 2 rabbis, so there's 2 sukkahs right there that we visit. Plus, we have a huge one for the entire shul that they use for different events throughout the week of Sukkot. It's actually very convenient that our rabbis have their houses literally adjoining the property of Chabad. Even in the summer, One of the rabbi's houses has a pool, and that's the pool that the summer camp uses. So we're always basically around their houses. Since a major mitzvah of Sukkot is to invite guests over and eat together in the sukkah, my family, we also made up a whole schedule of who would come on which day. On one of the days, we had my dad and my two brothers come with their families. On another, we had our friends. On another day, we had our oldest daughter and her boyfriend with his parents come. On another day, we had my mom. And then one of the evenings, like I said, we were invited to one of our rabbi's sukkahs, so that was part of the week. And then on another night, we had a dinner at our shul's sukkah, which is that huge one that they use for all kinds of special occasions. They had a buffet in there. It was just really fun. It was a whole week of fun socializing and, of course, tons of yummy food. So a great, unforgettable week. For next year, I plan to step it up a notch. I definitely want to purchase a lulav and etrog so we can use it in our sukkah every day. Of course, I will try to prepare much better in terms of knowing the prayers, when to say them, and when to shake the lulav and etrog, and in which directions, and all that. I want to try our best to have all of our meals in the sukkah, not just dinner, because last year, really, we basically just met in the sukkah for dinner, but you're supposed to have all your meals in the sukkah. Unless it rains or there's a hurricane, you should be spending as much time as possible in the sukkah. If you've never put up a sukkah, I encourage you to do so. If you're not handy, ask for help, or even hire someone to put it up for you. I know some people do that. Or, like I mentioned, on Amazon and other websites, there are kits. There are some, I think, that are just like pop-up tents that you can use. They make them in all kinds of sizes for all kinds of tastes and likes. I'm sure you can find something, because let's face it, our job is to keep our ancestors' traditions alive. Thank you for listening, and until next time.